Let me introduce you guys to Pokemon Odyssey and the Vepos region, a brand new Pokemon Fakemon region set on Greece and on Greek mythology. Now this is created by Pheobos.Fakemon, who you can find on Instagram, better known as Jay, so I will link their info down in the description so you can go and follow them as well. Now the map of Vepos I think is very cleverly done, because if we look at a map of Greece and turn it sideways, it looks just like the map of Vepos. Now in this game you can choose one of two protagonists, which are Alexis and Ilias, and they're actually twins, so your twin sibling is actually your rival in this game. Now let's go pick our starter Pokemon. We need to go and meet Professor Argon, whose name is based off the Argon tree. Now our grass starter is Baton, which is based off a sheep, and I think looks very cute how the wool is covering its eyes. It evolves into Bardia, and now the inspiration for this Pokemon line is becoming a bit more clear. This is actually based on a satyr, which is a Greek mythological nature spirit, and it's half goat and half man, and they like to play music, so it looks like the goat is playing the leaf here, which is very cool. And then its final evolution is Pandiadia, which is now a grass and fairy type Pokemon. So that inspiration for the satyr playing this long stick like a flute, but it's now also based on a Candia Cervus, which is a deer with very, very long straight antlers, like we can see here in our Pokemon as well. The fire type starter is called Tintoro, which is now based on a bull. The horns on its head almost look metallic with that coloring, which is really interesting. It evolves into Boverno, which is now getting a lot bigger, and it's now become bipedal as well. It also looks like a very strong Pokemon. And then its final evolution, Brasterion, is a fire and steel type. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone with the steel typing there. I love how the shoulder pads look like they have fires within them burning, which is really interesting. And fire is coming off his hands as well. And even its tail is kind of like an axe. But this is now based on Asterion, which is kind of like a minotaur in Greek mythology. And then our water type starter is called Sholfin, and it is based on a dolphin with a lot of pink coloring within there as well. And then evolves into Sedofin, which is getting much bigger. It's interesting how it has a fin on its belly as well as a dorsal fin on its back, and it's actually covered with a really thick foam now to help give it extra protection. And then its final evolution is called Delphidom, which is a water and fighting type Pokemon, so still based on our dolphin, but now has inspirations for Poseidon as well. Something you got to notice in this region, there's obviously a lot of Greek gods in Greek mythology, but they're all very humanoid, so a lot of the Pokemon inspirations we're going to see today are going to be based on those gods, but more so around the stories behind those gods, not the physical attributes itself. Let me know down in the comments which starter Pokemon you're going to choose. I'm going to choose the grass starter here. Alright, let's move into Route 1 next. In Route 1, we first have Chirat, which is our pure normal type, and you often see a basic kind of Pokemon to start with in Route 1. What you got to notice in Route 1, that a lot of the Pokemon here are just inspired by basic fauna within Greece, obviously based on a rat to start with. It evolves into Nitrojet, which is a normal and poison type Pokemon. I think this looks really interesting. The purple coloring within this whole Pokemon, giving it its poison element, I think is really, really well done. Our Route 1 bird is called Twinglet, which is a flying and normal type, and this is based on an eagle. Just a little chick at the moment. It evolves into Buzztar, so it's getting much bigger now, that kind of adolescent look. It's got big wings now, it's got some sharp talons as well. And then lastly evolves into Astrigal, which is now a flying and electric type Pokemon. Now this has Astro in its name as well as the eagle as well. It's got a bit of a celestial theme, which we're going to see a lot in this region because of all the astrology that has Greek origins. Next we have Tycolos, which is a dark and normal type Pokemon, and this is actually based on an Archalos, which is a badger that lives on the island of Crete. It evolves into Lycalis, which is now getting much bigger, and this also has inspirations for Lycaon, which is actually the name of an old king that actually tried to trick Zeus, so he was punished by Zeus by being turned into a wolf. Then we have our Route 1 bug, which is called Malavi, pure bug type, and this is based on the honeypot ant, and I think this is so cute. It's holding like a little orb of honey, I guess, and just like playing with it almost like a kitten would, which I think looks adorable. It evolves into Pupamba, which is now getting much bigger. It's got a big cocoon of honey which is protecting it. You can see the little body within this wrap of cocoon as well. And then its final evolution, Malambi, is a bug and rock type Pokemon, which is really interesting to give it that rock typing. Obviously based on a bee now, it's got that big stinger, but even those rocky spiky elements on the end of its arms and its legs as well is a really nice touch. And then next we have Grapite, which is a pure grass type Pokemon. These are based on grapes because obviously in ancient Greece there was a lot of wine coming from grapes. It evolves into Bushelak, which is now kind of got like a serpentine kind of body, I think. Very long here with a very long tail. But then its final evolution, Wyvine, is a grass and dragon type. Definitely looking serpentine here. Reminds me a lot of Serperior, I think, definitely with the shape of the body there, but very nice design here. Obviously got our worm or dragon inspirations coming in there as well now. And our Pika clone for the region is called Sutasagi. It's actually an electric and rock type. And like we had earlier, another one that's inspired by the cosmos. So this has giant stars on its ears, but also like coming out as has whiskers as well. Very fluffy, but they're shaped like stars. And now we have our first Vesposian Pokemon, which is Vesposian Sudowoodo. This is camouflaging within the vineyards because the other Pokemon, the wine-based Pokemon, actually hunts these down. So it tries to camouflage to hide from them. But it has a brand new evolution in Bakelda. Now this is based on Dionysus, which is the god of agriculture, and he's often seen with grapes or wine in his hands. Hence we've got the grapes here as well. Then next we have Polynox, which is a pure poison type Pokemon, which is based on a frog. And I think this looks very cute. And that actually evolves into a poison fire type Pokemon in Adaphroma. And this is a giant frog. It looks very lazy as well. It's actually based on Adaphasia, which is the personification of gluttony and is a goddess in Greek mythology. Next is Mimikyu, which is a pure steel type Pokemon. I always love it when a Fakemon artist tries to disguise a Pokemon like a Pokeball to give it camouflage. Then next we have Meramid, which is a fairy and water type Pokemon. Now, as we go through this line, I want you to keep in mind Ralts because the evolution line is very, very similar. Now, this is based on a mermaid, but it's also based on a naiad as well. And a naiad is kind of like a female spirit that preside over water. So Meramid evolves into Hydryad. So you can see it's kind of like a sad expression, but it's got the bubbles in their hair now rather than crying. But I love how it's coming out of a clam. That's a really cool look. Now, like the Ralts line, this has a split evolution, one being very masculine, one being very feminine. First of all, the feminine look is now based on a siren, and this is called Venucheek, and it's a fairy and steel type Pokemon. Still got that look of the clamshell opening up here, but also definitely looking kind of like a mermaid or like a siren as well here. Now, the more masculine looking one is now based on a merman. This is Tidaton. Doesn't have that clamshell look on the bottom of it anymore, but it has got some shells covering its shoulders like shoulder blades now. Then next we have Weavage, which is kind of like the Magikarp of the region. It's a pure water type Pokemon. It's based on the Greater Weaver, so it doesn't look like much yet, but it evolves into Colacetus, which is a massive water and dragon type Pokemon. This is now based on a Cetus, which is a massive sea monster that was actually sent by Poseidon to kill Andromeda. Then next we have Mbork, which is a pure fire type Pokemon based on a puppy. Of course, looks very, very cute. I love the name Mbork. That sounds so cute. It evolves into Orthermus, which is now a fire and ground type Pokemon, and it's now got 2 heads. So I wonder if you can work out what the final evolution is going to be based on. And you might have guessed that the final evolution was going to be based on Cerberus with our 3 heads now. The giant dog that guards the gates of the underworld. So this is called Cerberus. It is a very big Pokemon with massive claws and massive long tail with spikes on it as well. And then next we have Trasite, which is a pure fighting type Pokemon. It has really large horns, but obviously one big eye, and it's based on a Cyclops, of course. Evolves into Sterosite, which I think is a really interesting design. It's got 2 heads, but each of those heads only have 1 eye. I think that's a really cool idea. Still based on our Cyclops, of course. But then our final evolution, Cycloba, has now only got 1 head again, but those giant ears that it's got actually disguise. It looks like it has 3 eyes, but it only has the 1 eye. Again, very big, very muscly. I love the look of this Pokemon. And then next is Marblet, which is a pure rock type Pokemon. And if you think of ancient Greece, you probably think of some giant pillars and buildings that kind of look like this. I think that's really cool to have that as a Pokemon. It evolves into Marblunt, so it's getting much bigger now. It also has a couple of pillars here for legs as well. But then I absolutely love its final evolution in Marblabus, which is now a rock and dragon type Pokemon. Those ancient pillars have now formed a giant dragon. It's definitely got that dragon kind of body shape with a long neck and very long body and tail as well. Genesis is next, which is a Pokemon that doesn't evolve, but it goes to normal type, which I think is a very interesting combination. This is based on Gemini, which in astrology is known as the twins, but it's also based on Oisis, which is the personification of pain or distress. It looks very happy now, but it can actually flip its face around to have a sad expression instead. Then next we have Vesposian Tangle, which is a pure poison type, and the vines actually form snakes because this is now based on a Gorgon like Medusa. It has a new evolution called Tangorgon, so now its whole body is kind of serpentine as well now, but still has the snakes over its head, just like Medusa. LeBalance is a pure psychic type Pokemon, has lots of eyes over it, and I love the stars within it. That's because it's based on another constellation for astrology, which is Libra, which is the scales. But next we have Clayco, which is a pure ground type, and this is based on a gecko, but has a massive blue tongue on it as well. But evolves into Axcalarius, which is now a ground and dragon type Pokemon. This is based on Ascalibus, who was actually turned into a lizard because they were mocking a god. So don't mock gods. That's a bad idea. And then next we have Corinthon, which is a ghost and steel type, and we finally got some warrior-based Pokemon. Of course, the Greeks had a lot of warriors back in their time, so this has got like an ancient helmet over its head. It evolves into Spectroy, so it has Troy in its name, obviously a very famous area within ancient Greece. Has a massive spike on its body, which is interesting as well. And then evolves into Gladiathum, so it has the Spartan helmet. It's got like a shield on this arm, but like a spear on this arm, which is really cool as well. And then like the ancient Greek skirt for armor as well. Now, I absolutely love the Veposian Machop line. You're going to see why in a moment. This is now a rock and fighting type Pokemon, so it still looks a lot like a Machop, but it's obviously very rocky and has rocky spikes on the back as well. Of course, evolving into a Veposian Machoke. Very strong, but very rocky, but I absolutely love its final evolution with our Machamp, of course. It is now based on Atlas, and just like Atlas, it's carrying the massive globe on its back, and it's got 4 arms, so it's got 2 to hold the world, but 2 to fight with. Then next, Truffian is a ground and fighting type Pokemon based on our wild boars. It's got like a mohawk kind of design down its back here, but the hair is also covering its eyes as well, but I absolutely love its final evolution. Addo just looks fantastic. This looks like an absolute beast of a Pokemon. Massive tusks, massive spikes along its back as well, and even just like its attitude looks very, very aggressive. And then Veposian Mudbray is now a ground and grass type Pokemon. Looks kind of similar to our previous Mudbray that we already have, but this actually has a split evolution now. So obviously our first design is our Mudsdale, which we already have, but this one looks so different. I absolutely love this. It looks like it's got Phalanx shields along the side of it as well now, but has that Spartan helmet look on its head. I'm not such a big fan of its other evolution, which is Hephaestus. Kind of weird looking bipedal now, but has big clay on its body and it's on its arms there. So I'm not quite sure about this, but I do love the Mudsdale version. Then next we have Rascalt, which is a pure flying type Pokemon. This is of course based on our Pegasus, our winged horse. It evolves into Pegasaur, which is now giant. I really like the design of this Pokemon. I think it definitely has that feel of a Pegasus within it. Those massive wings that it's got, it looks quite agile. It's got a really long tail as well. But the mane, the big horn, all of it comes together, looks really, really well. I think it's done a Pegasus justice in this design. Then next we have Jubilate, which is an electric and fairy type Pokemon, obviously based on an ape. And then evolves into Cereprime. It has a very long tail. It's like as long as the whole body. But this is actually based on Socopsius, which was a mysterious forest creature within Greek mythology. And then probably my favorite Veposian form Pokemon in the entire dex is the Aron line. This is now a steel and dragon type Pokemon, and it's kind of got bronze armor covering its whole body. It evolves into Lairon, which is now looking giant, and that bronze armor covering it definitely makes it look quite dangerous. Like the armor's given it a horn on its head and spikes along its back as well. But then its final evolution in Aggron just looks amazing. Definitely has like Godzilla kind of look, but this is actually based on older depictions of a basilisk. You can see that within the coloring as well. The spikes along its back and tail look so cool. I think this just looks amazing. I love this version. Then next we have Garbelch, which this line is actually based on Gargoyles, so it doesn't look like much of a gargoyle yet, but you'll see it as it evolves. This is a pure ground type Pokemon, but actually has 2 forms. So our sandy form is ground type, but our snowy form is now ice type. It evolves into Targoyle, which is now a ground and poison type. So this sandy kind of look actually has corrosive elements to it. That's why it's a poison type. Our snowy form is still just our pure ice type though, but you can see the icicles for the claws and the horns on its head now. But I absolutely love its final evolution in Gargolem. So it is much bigger now. Definitely got more of a gargoyle kind of look and has rocky spikes along its back as well, but still has our snowy form as well. You can see the icicles are making the spikes rather than rocks here. Then next we have Pebble, which is a pure rock type Pokemon, obviously based on a kid or a baby goat. I really like the horns that it's got and the kind of the attitude. It's got a lot of attitude for just a baby goat. It evolves into Capricorn, so you might be able to tell in the name that this is based on Capricorn. And of course, Capricorn has the symbol of the goat within it as well. It's become a rock and ice type now. We can see the icicles in a few different elements along the body now. But what's really interesting is the tail of this Pokemon. It's kind of got like a mermaid or a dolphin tail. You wouldn't think that for a goat. Then next we have Nocthine, which is a psychic and flying type Pokemon. This is based on an owl, but it's also based on Athena. And we can also see that starry look within the wings. Again, this actually has a split evolution now. So the first one is Menterva, which is a psychic and fighting type Pokemon. So an owl that doesn't use its wings for flying. You can see it's definitely doing a kick, so that gives it its fighting type. And this is based on Minerva, which was actually the goddess of war. And then alternatively, the other evolution is Strigomnus, which is now a psychic and ghost type, a very different look. And this is now based on Somnus, which is actually the personification of sleep. So this definitely does look like a dreamy, sleepy kind of Pokemon. I think with the night sky all along the wings here. Next, we have Toxica, which is a poison and dark type Pokemon. And this line are based on chimeras. It's like a whole combination of different animals. So we've got like a snake tail, goat horns, but kind of like a lion body as well. It evolves into Chimera. So definitely looking a bit more adult now. That tail's gotten bigger. The body, the horns have gotten much longer as well. But then its final evolution, Miasmane, is now much bigger. Definitely looking like an adult lion now, especially because of the mane. But the ends of the mane also has spikes on it as well. Especially this back one has a very long spike. So this Pokemon looks really, really cool. Then next we have Grifflight, which is a normal and flying type Pokemon. This is based on a a Griffin. We can already see the Griffin elements in here with like the paws and the wings. It evolves into Zephyr, which is based on a Griffin, but also adds elements of Zephyr as well, which is one of the wind gods in ancient Greek mythology. It has the sharp claws of a Griffin, but obviously the bird-like head as well and beak. Then next for Vaposian Golurk. Now the artist tried to do something like a Alolan Marowak here, which has regular Cubone but an Alolan Marowak. So regular Golett evolves into a Vaposian Golurk. This is now fighting in Ghost type. This is based on Talos, but more so as an experiment when trying to mimic the legendary of this region, which I will show you soon. Then next we have Pedias, which is a pure dragon type Pokemon. It looks like a little baby snake. There's a lot going on here for just a baby snake at the moment with the patterns and the design and the eyes and everything like that. It evolves into Arceus, which is now a dragon and electric type. Now this is based on Asclepius, which is actually the god of healing. But the reason it's a snake because the rod of Asclepius, which is that rod that you see in medicinal symbols, has a snake that's wrapped around the rod. So that's why the god of healing is now also intertwined with a snake. And then next we have Molagia, which is a pure grass type Pokemon. And this is based on Hygeia, which is the ancient Greek goddess of health. Now this Pokemon doesn't evolve, and this is actually the Pokemon that helps out Nurse Joy in the Pokemon centers, like your Chanseys or Ordinos, which makes perfect sense when it's based on the goddess of health. Now Pokemon Odyssey is such a giant region that I can't include all of the Pokemon within this region video. So if you guys want to see all the Pokemon that we're missing here, as well as a bunch of trainers, rivals, gym leaders, all that sort of stuff, can all be found on Jay's Instagram, which is linked down in the description. Make sure you go and follow them and check out on all the stuff that we cannot fit within this video. But make sure you subscribe to my channel as well to check out all of the Fakemon regions that I've covered, and don't forget to chuck a like on the video as well. Alright, let's keep going. Then next we have Vaposian Applin, which is a dragon and poison type. Now it definitely looks a lot like our Applin, but obviously a different coloring here. And we know Applin has a lot of evolutions, but let's add another one with Applodon. I absolutely love the inspiration behind this. This is based on Ladon, which is the 100-headed serpent in Greek mythology, which actually guards the golden apple tree. So having that as an Applin evolution, I think just works perfectly. Then next we have Flyseas, the water and psychic type Pokemon. This is based on Pisces, which is of course based on a fish. This actually has a different version for male and female. It's only slight. The coloring is what is changing here. So you can see it definitely within this part of the fin here. The coloring is very slightly different. Then next we have Morabius, which is a water and dark type Pokemon based on our Moray eel, but it's also based on Chargis, which is a giant sea monster from Greek mythology. This Pokemon definitely looks like a giant monster. Looks very, very scary. Then next we have Aqualamari, which is a pure water type Pokemon based on Calamari or based on a squid. It evolves into Craquarius, which is a water and rock type Pokemon now. Has elements of the Kraken within it, but also kind of based on Aquarius, because Aquarius actually tried to flood the earth. So within this depiction, we've got like a giant pot here, and the squid is kind of like the water pouring out that Aquarius did to try to flood the earth. Then next we have Lurine, which is a pure ice type Pokemon. This line is based on Direwolves. Then evolves into Frigidai, which is now an ice and ghost type, and I think this looks amazing. The massive icicle spikes that's got along its body. The long fur that kind of goes into a spectral kind of wisp, giving its ghost type as well, looks really, really nice. Then next we have Trelaps, which is a pure normal type Pokemon, which looks a lot like a Bloodhound. It's actually based on Laylaps, which is a mythological dog that has never failed to catch what it is hunting. And the rival to that Pokemon is a Lucifox, the ghost and dark type Pokemon. Now this is based on a Tumesian Fox, which is a mythological fox that is destined to never be caught. So those two Pokemon are constantly running and chasing each other. Then next we have Birdie, the pure ice type Pokemon, which looks like a giant snowball. It's completely covered up in that fluffy snow. But its evolution is very different when we have Cryonics, an ice and fire type. Now obviously based on our Phoenix, you can see the fire elements coming off there. It's got a massive ribbon-like tail as well, which is quite nice. And now we have a new evolution to Kricketune, which is Kricketphius, the bug and normal type Pokemon. This is based on Orpheus, who had superhuman musical abilities. We can definitely see that within Kricketphius here. It's got like a big harp or big strings on the back there. And then next we have Luridice, which is a grass and ghost type. This is our Lurantis evolution now. This is actually based on Eurydice, who's actually the wife of Orpheus. And then Eurydice actually passed away, and Orpheus tried to bring her back to life with the power of his music. So these previous two Pokemon definitely have a relationship together. I've always thought that Phalanx needs a new evolution, and I think Sparteam is the perfect one for that. The shields of Phalanx is covering this entire body to make it look like a Spartan warrior. We've got the Spartan helmet, the shields on the hand, the legs, the feet, the shoulders, all of those looking very dangerous, very spiky. Now we're going into the 3 fossil Pokemon for the region. The first one is Bioceros, which is a grass and rock type Pokemon. Now all these fossils also share DNA with a current Pokemon that we have. So Bioceros shares its DNA with a Torterra and with a Rhyhorn, and you can see those elements within this Pokemon. It's got the Torterra kind of back, but also kind of looks like a rhino, especially with a big tree coming off its front horn here. Next is the Biocitan, a pure water type Pokemon. Pokemon. This shares its DNA with a Wailord, obviously looking like a very big whale type Pokemon, but also kind of like a cetacean as well. And then also our Biocadia is a flying and ground type. This is sharing its DNA with a Bombardier, so it definitely has that kind of stance and look that Bombardier has. Now next is Adobe, which is a very interesting Pokemon. This is a ground and fairy type Pokemon, but it's very much like a Ditto. So this Pokemon can actually transform into lots of different Pokemon as well. And that's why it's based on clay, because you can kind of mold clay. So you have your Ditto, you have your Zorua, and now you have your Adobe, which all can transform. Then next we have Lumitheus, which is actually based on Prometheus, who was the god of fire. Now Lumitheus is a pure fire type Pokemon, and I want you to think of Applin, how the actual Pokemon of Applin is not the apple itself, it's the worm. So this has the same kind of deal, where the actual Pokemon is the fire. It is not the statue that it is within. It just uses that to hold the flame. And then next we have Icarus, which is a fairy and flying type Pokemon. And this is the wax-winged Pokemon because it's based on Icarus, who had wax wings. And if you know the story of Icarus, you knew he flew too close to the sun and his wax wings melted. And that's exactly what's happened here with this evolution of Icarden. It's a fairy and fire type now, and it's got these big flames coming off it now, which I think is a really cool idea. Then next we have Shakalos, the pure dark type Pokemon. And this is actually based on a Colossoid, which is kind of like an ancient Greek voodoo doll, which is why you can see there's a pin that's going right through the neck of this Pokemon here. But the glowing eyes and the glowing parts on the knees and the hand definitely makes it look kind of spiritual and kind of creepy. Then we have Soul Ball, which is a pure ghost type Pokemon. This is based on an Obol, which is an ancient Greek coin, but this has a very special ability. If you put this Pokemon out after one of your previous Pokemon has fainted, depending on the type of that Pokemon, changes the kind of Pokemon that this transforms into. So you can see we've got all the different typings here, and they've all got a different kind of form. So our grass type, for example, is kind of like a flower. Our flying type kind of looks like a bird. So it changes how Soul Ball can battle. Now we have two pseudo legendaries within this region. I love both of them. I'd love to know which your favorite is. The first one is Hipponi, which is a pure dragon type Pokemon, and it looks a lot like a seahorse, but this whole line is actually based on a Hippocampi, which are sea monsters which are kind of like aquatic horses. So this is a pure dragon type, evolves into Dracampi, which has still got that seahorse kind of look in it, which is very nice here, combining both a horse and a seahorse together. The fins and stuff look very nice on it. And then lastly evolves into a Hippocampion, which is now a dragon and fairy type. Very interesting, this line is not a water type at all, but I kind of like that it's not what you would expect. Very, very interesting design here. Very long tail, it comes out with fins all over its body, almost making like wings as well, which make it look like a dragon. And then the alternative pseudo legend is Stray, again a pure dragon type Pokemon. This is based on a manta ray, but also does look a lot like a Gibble, I think. It evolves into Stellar Ray, so now like a manta ray has got massive wings coming out. Also got claws within the end of the wings there as well. But its final evolution, I think, is amazing. Cosmanta, dragon and psychic type Pokemon. Like we had a Gibble before, this guy looking like a Garchomp now. And the artist tried to give it vibes like Garchomp. And we can definitely see someone in the region using this like Cynthia uses her Garchomp. This Pokemon looks phenomenal. It's got lots of cosmos elements within the inside of its wings there. The coloring and the stars as well. Looking like a massive shark. Before we get into our legendaries, we have a Pokemon. This is not a legendary, but there is only one of this within the region. So think of like your Spiritomb. Not a legendary, but there is one of these in the region only. This is a bug and psychic type. This is called Somnoros. Again, we have another cosmos inspired Pokemon. We've got actual constellations within the wings of this moth-like Pokemon, which look really, really nice. This is based on Oneros, which is the personification of dreaming. All right, now there are a bunch of legendaries within this Pokemon. They're all kind of grouped together. So first we have two new Regis. First, Regineus is our pure psychic type Pokemon. Looks just like a brain. And then the alternative is Regileath, which is a pure dark type Pokemon. I definitely prefer this over the previous one. It's got like a big metallic skull almost on the top of its head, but has lethal in the name. It definitely looks very lethal, I think. Then next we have the Titan trio of legendaries, and these evolve from bronze to silver to gold, and all have different inspirations as well, and they're all steel types. So first, Oreodralis is a steel and rock type Pokemon, and this is based on the Hydra, which is a dragon with many heads. And if you look carefully, the feet of this Pokemon also look like heads. So if you flip this upside down, it would still have several heads and would still have the feet that it stands on as well, which I think is very clever. Then next is Asperceros, which is a steel and water type Pokemon, and this is based on Aspidoshalon, which is like Torterra, which is a massive tortoise that has something on the back. So Torterra has like that big island on its back. This has a massive shield on its back, which kind of makes me think it gives a look like a submarine, I guess, in a way. It's also very metallic looking, and we had bronze before. This is silver. Our final of the Titan trio is now gold. This is Chrysora, the steel and flying type Pokemon. And this is based off Chrysis, which was the god of gold, but it's also based on the Greek Sphinx. We know we have the Sphinx in Egypt. There was also a Greek Sphinx, which was similar but kind of different. The Greek Sphinx actually had wings, which is why this is a flying type. And also looks like it's got fiery propulsions coming from the wings and tail as well, which I think looks very interesting. All right, now we're going into the box art legendary of the game. Pokemon Odyssey, there is only the one game. There's not the two like we often see, but this is the box art legendary. Talossol is a giant Pokemon, pure steel type Pokemon. This is based off Talos, which was a giant automaton that was made of bronze to protect the island of Crete. And this does look like a giant golem, giant statue. Definitely looks like it's something that could protect an entire region. And then next we have Artissa Titan, which is a fire and rock type Pokemon, which is completely covered in magma. And this is a very bulky Pokemon as well. Now this Pokemon is based on Hephaestus, which is actually the god of blacksmiths. And this giant molten core in the middle of it is kind of like a giant forge, because this Pokemon was actually used to create the previous Pokemon, which then acted as the protector of the region. And now our final legendary before we get into the mythical is Fairypo, the ghost and water type Pokemon. And this is based on the ferryman, which guides souls across the river Styx into the underworld, which I think is such a cool idea. This definitely has a very grim, sinister look within this Pokemon. And that's because it's traveling souls to the underworld. Of course it has to be sinister looking. So that looks amazing. And then our mythical Pokemon for the region is Cuparo, the fairy and flying type Pokemon, which looks very cute, which a lot of mythicals do. Like if you think of your Celebi or your Mew, very cute mythical. This is based on Eros, which is essentially like the Greek version of the Roman Cupid. So that's why it's got arrows coming out of it and that pink coloring to symbolize love as well. What an amazing region. Make sure you guys follow the artist linked in the description to check out more of this region as well. Now, my favorite Pokemon were Pandiadia, Cycloba, Veposian Aggron, and Cosmanta. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite were. If you enjoy Fakemon, make sure you check out some of my other Fakemon regions as well. See you guys.